I have a freelance railroad, the Blue Ridge and Western, and I've really loved developing its story. But sometimes I just want to run a Class 1 or an older era. This is how I do it. Before we begin, I just want to let you know that this episode is brought to you with support from Walthers and their Titans of Steel trading cards. These things are really, really cool. I've got some right here. I've got the Durango and Silverton Railroad, Dash 840V, Via Rail Canadian, 50-foot reefer, Milwaukee Road, Everett Station, Windsor Station in Montreal, just a bunch of these. They're really cool and a super fun thing to add to the railroad, and I can really see these being something that are brought to train shows and they're being trading events. So check them out, the link in the description. You can check them out, Walthers Titans of Steel trading cards. Now, back to this. Now, my railroad is built entirely to emulate the foothills of Western North Carolina, and this is where you find the Yadkin Valley Railroad, the railroad that the Blue Ridge and Western is based on. But in reality, two Class 1s actually run through Western North Carolina. That's Norfolk Southern and CSX. So in theory, I can run any of these and they will match the scenery. So let's look at some of the equipment that I need to pull this off. For my layout, I need two main things, a through train and a local. These two mainline engines, in this case, I'm using an ET44 and a Dash 9 as my power for this. For the local, I'm running a pair of SD40-2s, one regular and one high hood. Now, one cool thing about running modern trains is that as long as it works in your era, you can run whatever you want. There's no specific road names required, except for maybe unit trains, but overall, you can use whatever you want. All right, let's get started. First, we're going to have our manifest freight pulling through the layout. Now, I like to make it to where I can run a couple laps before stopping to drop off, just adding some mileage to the run, but you can do whatever you want with your layout. Now, our drop-off spot is at Elen, and there is a siding, and we are dropping off a slew of grain hoppers for the feed mills that the local is going to switch later. We can now take that manifest off the layout or do a couple more laps before it goes off the layout, whatever we want. Next up is that local that is leaving from the same yard that the manifest came, so it's going to be coming from the same direction. It has a set of cars for the industries around the layout. Now, when you are running larger locals like this, it's probably going to help to have two locomotives in the consist. They will be needed to be speed matched so you can do this, and you definitely don't have to do this. I've run plenty of locals with a single engine on their layout, but it might help if you have a larger local. We arrive at the first job, the OSB board plant. We bring our cars onto the run around track and clear the main for any trains that are coming through. Now, while they're doing that, let me tell you about another easy way to customize your layout. I do not glue down any of my buildings. This way I can change them based on industry or era. Sometimes I'll also use generic industrial buildings like this metal building for my industry, so that all I have to do is change out a few items to make it an entirely different industry. Okay, now the industry's been switched out and we can head over here to Elen. In Elen, we need to switch out the steel fab plant, and then we need to grab the grain hoppers that need to go to the feed mill that we already passed, and then we'll come back and grab the rest of them and take them on to the next feed mill. One little thing that I like to do to keep the layout as flexible as possible is transload tracks, or team tracks you might know them as. These are sidings where virtually anything can be loaded or unloaded. You can do tank cars, box cars, flat cars, hopper cars, you name it. It's usually shared by several industries, so you can do what you want depending on the op session. Now our train takes those grain cars and heads back to the feed mill. Here you can see another way I can keep my industries flexible. Notice the asphalt parking lot. Now you may have also noticed this at the OSB board plant. There's even one over at the steel fab. The buildings are not attached, as I said before, so the generic ground lets me put anything there, as well as not having the buildings attached. All I have to do is switch it out. Now you can do this with pavement or gravel. I've done both of these on my layout. I've done this actually over in Rural Hall with one of the little buildings. And you can also do this with downtown merchants rows by attaching sidewalks to buildings rather than the ground. Okay, let's switch the feed mill. Now we can head back to Elkin and pick up our grain train to head to the big feed mill to the west.
Okay, let's do a quick recap. I keep my layout flexible so that I don't rip it out every time I want to change. I purchase rolling stock that can work with any of my railroads that I want to run. I don't permanently attach buildings so they're easy to change out. I use transload tracks to allow for more flexible rolling stock choices, and I use flat generic areas like asphalt and gravel to keep industry placement fresh and flexible.
I'm still working on my operations and tweaking them and figuring out how I can get the Blue Ridge and Western working more seamlessly with the Class 1s that I want to run, which are Norfolk Southern and CSX. It's a process that the flexibility I have worked into my layout allows. Do you do anything that lets your layout be more flexible? Let me know in the comments below. I'd really like to see that. Plus, I think it'd be interesting to get a whole big list of it. Thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, I'm Jimmy from the DIY and Digital. Stay safe, be kind, and happy railroading.